This is Dwayne at realfixesrealfast.com. We've had a lot of requests for transmission-related diagnostic videos, so we've got one today that we're going to bring to you. We're working on an 09 Jeep Wrangler with a 3.8 engine. The driver stated that as they were driving along, it started developing shifting problems. First it was just kind of shifting irregular, and then it wouldn't shift or move at all, so they had it towed in. We're going to show you what we found. Now, one thing that's a little bit different about this Jeep is that it's right-hand drive. This person happens to be a rural postal carrier, so they actually bought this vehicle with right-hand steering. So when you see us in the car, we're going to look like we're on the wrong side, but that's because it's right-hand steering. But as far as the transmission is related, it's all the same. This is Corey. He does all of our transmission work here at the shop, so I'm going to turn it over to him and let you explain the procedure, the diagnostics, and what we're going to do.
Here with this Jeep, we have the 3.8 V6 with the 42 RLE overdrive automatic. With this particular one, we have code P0732, which is an incorrect gear ratio code, i.e. the transmission has slipped.
This code sets when the transmission cannot be shifted to second gear, even if the electrical circuit is good.
The transmission is attempted to shift into second gear, and it has slipped just enough for the ECU to realize, hey, this is too much, and we'll default the transmission into second gear.
The default means it only allows second gear, but second gear is the one with the problem.
We also have code P1790. This code usually follows after an incorrect gear ratio code. In our case, it's second gear. This code tells us that we had a fault after the shift occurred as well, meaning that we still continue to have slippage. Now that we have our codes, we're going to go into the scanner and we're going to look at some data. We're going to go up to transmission, system test. We're going to go into clutch test. Up here you'll see first gear clutch test, second gear clutch test, third gear clutch test, and reverse gear clutch test. The 42 RLE is all clutches and one-way rollers. So we have the option of testing individual clutches. What we're going to do first is show you guys what a good clutch test should do. We're going to select first gear clutch test in random. Going to place the gear selector into drive. Now this is showing us digital information. We don't want to look at all of this. Mostly what I want to see is graphs. So I'm going to go to custom, deselect all. I'm going to select turbine speed RPM, engine speed RPM, present gear, and throttle blade position, along with output speed RPM. Select OK. And now you see we have these up in digital, but we would like to see that in graph form as well. Turbine speed RPM is a really important one with this test. We're going to select it in graph mode. Here we have our engine speed RPM in graph form, and we have our turbine speed RPM in graph form. Right now the turbine is freewheeling, so we're going to have an RPM change. When we initiate our test, turbine speed will drop to 0, or should in this case. We're going to initiate our test.
Now I'm going to freeze this screen in order to explain something. Remember, our scopes are always going to display in min-max if that's turned on, which I have. So on the left you're going to see the parameters at 687 to 710. And on the right, for the turbine speed, there's 602 to 680. That's all it's seeing at this point because we haven't raised the throttle or changed that speed threshold. So in a moment, we're going to raise the throttle and change that speed threshold, and it's going to register from 0 all the way on up. So it's looking normal now and the same until we raise the throttle. So watch it closely.
For the first gear clutch. Now note engine speed and turbine speed RPM. I'm going to apply throttle up to about 30%. Always keep in mind, you don't want to go more than a few seconds with that much throttle with the brakes off, because you can overheat the transmission. So we're going to increase our throttle with the brakes applied, and note turbine RPM. Note, there was hardly a blip on turbine speed RPM. A little bit of slippage, a couple counts, is normal. We'll show you what is not normal here in the next test. Okay, now we're ready to do the clutch test that we think there's a problem with. So we're going to select second gear clutch test, go through the steps, Okay, we're on our second gear clutch test. This is the clutch that we believe there is an issue with. Note, your turbine speed is 0, now that the unit is in drive, and note your engine RPM. We're going to do the same thing with the first gear clutch test. We're going to increase throttle and see what our returns are. So I'm going to initiate the test and apply some throttle. Keep note at turbine speed RPM versus engine RPM. Notice with just a little throttle, we start to match engine RPM. That tells us that this clutch is slipping very bad. And you can also note a little bit of a whining noise coming from underneath the car. This is a very bad slip. If you recall, when we did the first gear clutch, that we had almost zero turbine movement. Again, a little bit is normal. A couple blips on the screen, no big deal, because naturally clutches do slip. But in this case, we have a very bad slip. This vehicle would almost not move whenever it would try to achieve second gear, or the RPM would flare up. Now the ECU sees this while you're driving, and most likely while she was driving, it detected this really bad slip and commanded the TCU, transmission control module, into default, which on this particular Chrysler automatic is second gear. The only problem with this is second gear is the gear that has failed, so it renders this Jeep not moving, thus having been towed in. So this gives you an idea of the electronics involved in today's automatic transmissions. Now, based on our graphs here and what we've showed you, this gives us evidence that there is something mechanical wrong inside this transmission versus something electronic. So our next step is to pull the transmission and go through it, overhaul it, inspect parts, see what we need to do.